So Ariel and his team are completely coping about Francis Ngannou fumbling the bag, and they fail to admit this, and they are being really delusional about it. And I'm going to go through that in today's video and play this video in the background that you're seeing right now, the recent episode of the MMA Hour, and go through some of the moments where I disagree with them and feel like they are disingenuously coping about Ngannou's failed free agency. But before I even get into that, I'll get into that probably around the 3 or 4 minute mark of this video. I have a lot to say about this situation, and I'm going to get into it right now. So, I feel like Ngannou fumbled the bag, not because of ONE FC not wanting to sign him, which is what everyone is reacting to. ONE FC comes out and says, we are not looking to pursue a deal with Francis Ngannou. We could not come to an agreement. And now Ngannou is basically left with PFL, who apparently he already knew he was going to sign with from the get-go. He was just testing other offers afterwards. Whatever. I want to talk about that situation. That is not the reason why Ngannou fumbled the bag. ONE FC pulling out of the deal and not wanting to sign Francis Ngannou for whatever disagreement they had is not the reason he fumbled the bag. The fumbling of the bag is this, and I should know because I called this from the very beginning. The first interview Ngannou did, and the first moment it even came out that he was going to leave the UFC for good and not re-sign with their deal, I said this is going to go terribly for him. He doesn't understand what he's getting into. I don't see this working out. And the reason why I said that, and the reason why I think he fumbled the bag in general, was because we have now gone. Forget about ONE FC not wanting to sign him and him being left with PFL. The fact that the conversation has gone from Fury for 50 million in boxing, Joshua for 50 million in boxing, and Wilder for 50 million in boxing, to ONE FC or PFL for his next move, is the fumbling of the bag that I spoke of. A lot of people are saying, wow, El Ngannou, ONE FC didn't want to sign him. He took an L before ONE FC didn't decide they wanted to sign him. He took an L with this free agency move, and he fumbled the bag with this whole move that he made the second he didn't immediately get the Fury fight or the Joshua fight or the Wilder fight in boxing for $50 million. And that's my take on the whole situation. The fact that we went from Fury, Wilder, or Joshua for $50 million to, looks like it's Ante Delija at PFL is the fumbling of the bag. He's not fumbling because ONE FC didn't want to sign him. He's fumbling because ONE FC was even in the conversation of signing him. And that's my point. And I want to talk about Ariel in this video quite a bit because I feel like they did this disingenuously. And I think Ariel is part to blame as to why Ngannou fumbled the bag. And that's why he's going to cope in this video that I'm about to go through with you guys. I think he championed Ngannou leaving the UFC, and this is just my own personal opinion. I'm sure some of you might agree with. I think he championed Ngannou testing free agency, filled his head with fantasy and dreams about all the potential. Oh, he's going to get a Fury fight for 50 million. Oh, Wilder next. What about Joshua? He filled his head with these dreams because I believe, not because he wanted the best for Francis Ngannou. Now he might want the best for Francis Ngannou, but because he doesn't like Dana White. And Dana White was at the forefront of this failed deal with Francis Ngannou leaving the UFC and testing free agency. So I think behind a lot of Ariel's motives here was the fact that he hates Dana White and he wanted to see the UFC make a deal and Dana White make a decision that blew up in his face and see Ngannou make a bunch of success. Not for Ngannou's bottom dollar, not for Ngannou's best interest, but because I think he really wanted to see Dana White make a massive mistake and see Ngannou rub it in Dana White's face. That's why I think Ariel championed Ngannou so much. And now he's coping about the fumbling of the bag and talking about and championing Ngannou because he doesn't want to admit that he was the reason why this all happened. So he can't admit that. He can't admit that because of this fail, he was the reason. Him and other MMA media members and other people around Ngannou not being real with him and filling his head with dreams and fantasy. The fact that we went from Fury, Joshua, or Wilder for $50 million in a boxing world title fight, potentially, to PFL is an L. It's a fumbling of the bag. Let's get into this video straight away. 6 minutes, 33 seconds. They talk about ONE FC pulling out from the bidding war of Francis Ngannou that's going on right now. And they talk about the fact that maybe ONE FC did it because, you know, Ngannou had already signed a deal with PFL and they knew that and they wanted to get out ahead of the press and say that, you know, it wasn't because we couldn't pay him. It was because we didn't want to make a deal with him, which they very well could have done. But we start here just to give you context.
So, you know, I see everyone writing this story now, and I see everyone shitting on Francis. And I also see, and part of this is because of, you know, my good friend Ant, and I see everyone shitting on Francis. And
we're not shitting on Francis. Some people are. I'm not. I'm not just absolutely going off on Francis. I'm going off at you and other absolute morons encouraging this decision. That's what I'm going in on. Honestly, I don't want to see Ngannou go absolutely broke. I don't want to see that happen. That would be evil, okay? Obviously not. I'm going after you and people that filled his head with these decisions. I'm allowed to make a prediction about a deal that goes down with Ngannou in the UFC or a deal that doesn't go down and predict the future on that and maybe be happy and gloat that I was right about it. That's not me tearing into Ngannou in any way. But we move on. A lot of people aren't shitting on Ngannou. They're shitting on the fact that his decision was made and it was wrong and it was encouraged by you.
And I also see, and part of this is because of, you know, my good friend Ant Evans, who has created this narrative that I've like, I'm in the bunker with Francis on this one.
There's no narrative that's been creative, and part of it is because of my good friend, this guy who came up with this narrative that I'm in the bunker with Ngannou. You are, and you have been from the get-go. What were you telling him when he first left the UFC? Oh my God, this is great. We're going to get a Fury fight and a Wilder fight and a Joshua fight. Really looking forward to it, man. And that's what you were filling his head with. It's now PFL, and the best heavyweight they have to offer is probably Ante Delija. That's a massive L. It just is. But whatever, you were absolutely in the bunker with Francis Ngannou. You were team him this whole time, and you rooted for him for disingenuous reasons that I spoke about before. But yeah, it's just a narrative that got created by one of your friends.
When he's got his own people doing his own thing.
Ngannou doesn't have his own people doing his own thing. He doesn't have a management team.
This like rush to try to claim that Francis has fucked up, when in reality, he left the UFC in January.
We're not rushing to say that he messed up.
You know, he's allowed to take as long as he wants to figure out what he wants to do.
And the longer he takes, the worse it gets for him. I want to talk about that as well. The longer he takes, the worse it gets for him in terms of how much of a payoff this could have been in an alternate universe. This isn't going well for him. I'll tell you this right now. His chances of getting a Joshua fight, a Fury fight, a Wilder fight are going to be lowered the longer he waits, and are going to be lowered because he's taking a PFL fight in the meantime. That's an absolute fact. Ngannou has been left with the best of a bad situation right now, and that doesn't mean it's a win, because it's still a bad situation, and the bad situation is the L. Okay? The longer he waits, it gets worse. The fact that he's going to take a PFL fight in the meantime against maybe an Ante Delija or someone like that, or maybe they sign a Bader from Bellator, I know PFL's looking to buy out Bellator, means that boxing's not going to be interested. If you don't think they weren't looking to snatch up Ngannou because he sold like 200, 300,000 pay-per-views against Cyril Gane. He's not the star you guys told him he was. That's a fact. Otherwise, if he really sold millions of pay-per-views and they knew they could sell 1 million pay-per-views like Garcia versus Tank, they would immediately make an Ngannou matchup versus Joshua or Wilder. 100%. If he takes a PFL fight and they weren't impressed with 200,000 pay-per-views in the UFC or 300,000, imagine how unimpressed they're going to be when they see, hang on a second, Ngannou, you sold, 40,000 pay-per-views with the PFL? That's a high-end estimate that I'm giving there. We don't have, and you want 50 million? This is worse for him. He should have gone straight from the UFC to boxing. That was the best way of doing it. The longer he waits, the worse it gets. The fact that there's a Bridger fight in the middle, which will really show his star power on his own, which is not a lot, because I know everyone's just going to watch back what happened. All the casual fans are just going to watch back what happened on YouTube the next day if he wins a fight against Ante Delija at PFL. That's what they're going to do. And boxing promoters are going to see that, and that's the problem I have. We're not rushing. We're being real with the situation.
And quite frankly, it's a bit of a complicated scenario. It's not just signing with an MMA promotion. It's signing with an MMA promotion who's also going to be okay with him boxing as well. It seems like people are almost celebrating every time they have, they come across like some sort of perceived L on his part as the...
It's not a perceived L. I don't need to keep going over this, but it's not a perceived L. And we're not celebrating the downfall of Ngannou. We're just being right and happy that we were right about the situation. And we're almost angry at you guys for filling his head with this because you hate Dana White. That's so obvious as to why you wanted this Ngannou move to go so well. Sure, maybe you wanted the best for Ngannou, but you know for a fact, part of Ariel's mind, I think, part of Ariel's mind when he wanted Ngannou to do well was, yeah, make sure Dana really regrets his decision, the moron, and all that type of stuff. I bet you that was in there. We're not rushing, and it's not a perceived L. We went from 50 million against Fury, Wilder, or Joshua. That was the original expectation as a win for Ngannou to, looks like it's PFL. That's an L.
The kids like to say, which is a little bit bizarre to me because it feels like we should almost be wanting fighters to have more options and to get what they're worth, et cetera, et cetera.
And this is how he gaslights. It feels weird to me that everyone's celebrating the demise of Francis. We're not, because it feels like we should be wanting fighters to actually do well outside the UFC and have more options. No one's against that. That's not the alternative argument to you here. No one's against that. They're against a decision that was made, that was terrible, that everyone saw coming from the get-go. But you, because of disingenuous reasons.
In this case, it felt like everyone ran with the one side of the story. When, let's be honest, sometimes, there's a little bit of bending of truth. Not getting...
I want to point out that he actually accused the owner of ONE FC of bending the truth there. Because later on he says he's not calling him a liar. I don't know if I've included that at the end of this video or not. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. We'll see.
His side of the story, just to paint him in a negative light, to me is a bit of a weird one.
Not painting Ngannou in a negative light. We're painting you in a negative light for doing this. So not only are you propping up Ngannou and using Ngannou and using the idea of Ngannou being successful as a free agent to get back at the UFC and Dana White, you're now hiding behind him and saying, why are they all attacking Ngannou for this? Worm behavior, coping.
So I have a few thoughts on that.
Sure.
Number one, you're absolutely right. Like anybody calling like the Francis Ngannou thing a failure at this point feels premature just because the outcome hasn't been played yet.
But the outcome has been played. The outcome was the first move that was made because it was the most important move. The first move went from the potential idea of him getting a Fury, Joshua, or Wilder fight. That was the first move that was anticipated. He was in the ring with Fury. Fury was saying, yeah, let's have a fight. And I said the whole time, Fury's not going to take that fight. It's not going to sell the pay-per-views he wants it to. I think he's just going to forget about this and move on. And then Fury fought Chisora instead. If they don't tell you they ain't interested in Ngannou right now, I don't know what does. This ain't we're not rushing. The first move was the most important. And we went from Fury, Joshua, or Wilder to Ante Delija at PFL. That's an L.
No matter what's happening here, no matter the back and forths, we don't know what the end result of this departure from the UFC is for Francis Ngannou. He could sign tomorrow for the most money anybody's ever signed for in fighting history.
That's their idea that it isn't an L yet. Listen to that stupid sentence. And this is why you can't have people just tickling Ngannou's balls on the media. You got to have realists with you, Ngannou. Listen to what he just said. This is the reason why it might not be a fumbling of the bag just yet, because there's a potential that
he could sign tomorrow for the most money anybody's ever signed for in fighting history.
More than Mayweather, Joshua, Fury, Conor McGregor, Manny Pacquiao. He could sign tomorrow for the most money anyone's made in fighting history. That's why we can't rush to call it an L yet. You still think that's a potential. That was never a potential in the first place anyway. We can't rush to call this an L because Francis Ngannou...
He could sign tomorrow for the most money anybody's ever signed for in fighting history.
Listen to these idiots! God, they annoy me.
We don't know what this is, so that to me feels premature.
It's not premature. It's not premature. And he will not sign for the most money anyone's ever made in fighting history. Anyone can tell you that. He sold 200,000, 300,000 pay-per-view buys in his last one. You think he's getting paid more than McGregor, Mayweather? Most money anyone's made in fighting history? You fucking idiots. We move on. 8 minutes 52. There's so much more. It's going to be a long video, boys.
I agree with you fully. Like, this is not a done deal. We don't know what the net result of what Francis Ngannou is happening with Francis Ngannou.
We don't. And we don't know that yet. But we can have a pretty good idea and be real about it rather than acting like he's going to sign the most money anyone's ever made in fighting history, you idiots. 9:42. Let's go on to this.
Just a reminder to the people, like, if a promoter comes out and says, I'm not doing a deal, like, just because David Feldman and Chatri say, think about why they're doing that.
Well,
think about why they're doing that.
Ariel is trying to insinuate that there's an ulterior motive as to why these people are coming out and saying that they don't want to sign with Francis Ngannou. That's what he's doing. He's trying to insinuate. Think about why they're not signing with him. Because they don't want him? Or because they couldn't afford him and don't think they can make money off of him with the amount that they're paying him? Think about why they're not signing him. There's a secret agenda here. No, there isn't. They ain't signing him. They ain't signing him because PFL's got him and they don't want to bid above that because that's their bottom line. Their businesses. They know what they can make and they know what they can make if they pay Ngannou a certain amount. That's a fact. They're not looking out for Ngannou's best interest. They're looking out for their business. That's a fact. Okay? So the reason, even if you think, it's because they couldn't afford Ngannou, it's not that they can't afford him, it's that they can't afford him and make money from him at the same time. We move on.
Just think objectively, right? Like, does every single promotion who's potentially interested in Francis Ngannou, when it's time for brass tacks, do they have the means to pay for Francis Ngannou? And can they, once they potentially do pay for Francis Ngannou, maximize his abilities and what he brings to the table in order to produce something? If I'm Bellator, right?
They're talking about the fact that, think about it like this though, maybe not all organizations can really maximize using Ngannou. I'm so glad you brought this up when Ngannou was first going into free agency. I'm so glad these topics were discussed to Francis Ngannou, rather than it's going to be amazing, you're going to get this and that and this and that. But now all of a sudden, maybe they're not signing him because they can't sign him. Well, thank you for bringing that up now. Thank you so much for bringing that up now. Maybe they can't pay him that much and maximize the amount that they get from Ngannou. Maybe they can't do that. I'm so glad you brought that up to him and were real with him. Oh, wait, you weren't. You filled his head with dreams. Oh, well.
I don't have a pay-per-view product. Now, Showtime, I could see a world where, like, hey, we do a deal with Francis Ngannou to fight MMA and to fight boxing. That, I think, could be something potentially lucrative.
Potential. But I think if they see how much, if they do MMA first, which it's looking like they're going to do, and the boxing promoters see how much he really makes in the MMA world, I don't think they're going to be looking at 50 million, I'll tell you that much. I don't think they're going to be looking at that. And it had to be boxing first. He had to go straight from being the former UFC heavyweight champion, fresh, before Jones had even fought Gane, and had a fight signed and would have been fighting by maybe May or June. He had to make the move quick. But now we've waited too long. And if we do something in MMA in the meantime, against an absolute no-name heavyweight in PFL, like Ante Delija, he's going to get absolutely torn apart by boxing because he's going to do that fight. They're going to say, okay, well, we're willing to discuss a fight with you and Joshua. How much are you asking for? 50 million? How much did your PFL pay-per-view sell? Or how much did your Bellator fight sell against Ryan Bader? Oh, I'm sorry, how much? Right, we'll do 5 million for you to fight Joshua. That's how they work.
But Bellator is a promotion. They don't have a pay-per-view vehicle. They're a product that's on linear television.
They don't have a pay-per-view vehicle, Bellator. So glad these guys thought of this and mentioned it to Ngannou, and Ariel mentioned this to Ngannou and thought of his best interest by mentioning that Bellator doesn't even have a pay-per-view model when he was first thinking of becoming a free agent.
I want to pay Francis Ngannou all this money to put him on linear television. Maybe not. If I'm one championship, I have this deal with Amazon, right? We're in a different business. Do I want to? Just because somebody initially expressed interest and then is not ultimately able to do a deal, I don't think is any indictment on Francis Ngannou. It's business. It's trying to figure out, can I maximize what Francis Ngannou is going to give me for what I'm paying for him? And quite frankly, some people just can't get there. Like,
exactly. But we're not going after Ngannou. It's not an indictment on Ngannou or whatever word you used. It's an indictment on his decision. You just said it yourself. Maybe these guys can't even afford Ngannou and don't want to have Ngannou. I wish people would have been real with him and said, hey man, maybe these other promotions ain't going to be interested and can't afford you. So there might be less options. But no one was bringing this stuff up to him. No one was bringing all these complications up to him. It was all sunshine and rainbows. Do it. Get back at Dana White and the UFC. Do it, Ngannou. We believe in you. Fucking idiots.
They might not be in that game for Francis Ngannou. So for them to say, like, I'm withdrawing is almost like I'm breaking up with you before you break up with me. Or it's like,
Exactly.
It's me coming out.
Exactly, says Ariel Helwani. So, like, you were aware of this when Ngannou first tested free agency, when you were bringing up Bellator and ONE FC, and they're all going to be bidding for Ngannou. Exactly. They just can't afford him. Now that's a change of tune.
And saying, like, you know what? I didn't really want to buy that Ferrari. I can't afford a Ferrari. Maybe I just can't afford a Ferrari.
That's
at the end of the day.
I can't lie.
That's exactly it.
That's exactly it.
You nailed it.
You nailed it. They just can't afford him and never could in the first place. Thank God you mentioned it to Ngannou, man. Thank God you mentioned that to him before he made this move. And now he's been left with one offer from PFL. See how that one works out. I hope it works out well. It don't look good, man. It don't look good at all. 11:36 on the clock.
There's lots of things that he asked for. Just because somebody is withdrawing from the conversation doesn't mean they were ever even in the conversation to begin with, to be completely honest.
Just because someone's withdrawn, this is the absolute copiest cope I've ever heard in my life. Just because they're withdrawing from the bidding for Ngannou doesn't mean they ever really wanted him. So, like, anything to avoid saying this is bad for Ngannou, pretty much. You know? Just because they said they were interested in having Ngannou and had all of these business meetings with him doesn't necessarily mean that they really wanted Ngannou in their promotion. They all wanted Ngannou in their promotion, but they were realistic about how much they could pay for him. They didn't even want him in the first place. You know what I mean? Like, that's like walking up to a girl on the street saying, hey, let's say you walk up, you're feeling low on confidence, you walk up to a mid-ting in the street, yeah? And you go, hey, you want to go out? And she says no. And then to cope, you go, well, you're fucking ugly anyway, bitch. I didn't want you anywhere. That's how they're coping about this right now.
It's also what you said, Ariel. Like, it's not.
We move on to 12:19.
That's for failure before we make these jumps.
And honestly, so the boxing component is the big, question here. Which direction is he going to go? Is he going to go with a promoter? Does he have a big fight lined up, et cetera, et cetera? And we'll see. Is he going to go with a network?
If he had a big fight lined up, he would have gone straight to them first. He would have gone, there would be no, hey, do it through PFL. If Ngannou had Wilder, Joshua, or Fury lined up for him, yeah, that would have been immediately the first move. It wouldn't be, hey, Eddie Hearn's like, hey, Ngannou, we want to do the fight, but make sure you sign with PFL first. No. We want to do the fight, wait there, let him do this matchup, and then we'll make the fight real quick. We'll do it in summer. That's what would have been the conversation.
If you would have asked me, okay, who are his options to fight in MMA? Because that seems what...
And when you say options, you mean like realistic options. Because to the point I was trying to make before, like when Francis announced his free agency, everybody came out and was like, I'm interested in Francis. I'm interested in Francis. Are you a real contender is a completely different conversation, right?
And the two that I would have crossed off the list off the bat would have been bare knuckle and one.
Yeah, so there you go.
Why didn't you mention that to him at all? This conversation is being had now, whilst Ngannou is stranded in the middle of the ocean with he's onto like low air on his lifeguard. You know what I mean? Or whatever it is, that life vest that he's got. He's on low air. He's paddling. He's, oh my God, I'm in the middle of the ocean. I've already jumped ship on the UFC. I'm left out here. Oh, by the way, Ngannou, I never thought Bellator or I never thought ONE FC or BKFC would even be an option for you. Thank God you're mentioning that now. Like, oh, you knew it the whole time. How convenient that the two people that have pulled out of making a deal with Ngannou right now, BKFC or ONE FC, are the two promotions that Ariel didn't really see doing it anyway. I would never have picked them anyway to make a deal.
Francis wasn't going to bare knuckle, in my opinion.
He was never going to go to BKFC, coping about them not signing him.
So cross them off the bat.
I agree, though. BKFC was last on the list.
Yeah.
Didn't love the way that was painted, and I'm going to ask Dave about that. David Feldman,
who basically said Ngannou asked for ridiculous money.
Who's joining us at 140, and two, Francis to 1 makes no sense to me.
But him to PFL does. It makes no sense. Why did you encourage this then? Because you encouraged it on the condition that he would be fighting Fury, Joshua, or Wilder within 6 months.
Makes zero sense to me. I don't think it's in his best interest right now to go fight predominantly in Asia. Now,
they're going to America, and he mentions this.
I know they're coming to the U.S. on Friday. They have their first show. There's a very busy weekend coming up.
I think ONE FC made the most sense instead of PFL. Maybe the Showtime connection will help, but they're with Bellator. PFL might buy Bellator, and PFL's with ESPN. Maybe that's going to get a deal made. Who knows? I think ONE FC was a good option for Ngannou, to be honest with you. They would likely pay him a lot of money. They have boxing infrastructure in their sport anyway as an MMA promotion. PFL is an MMA promotion. I know they have the connection behind the scenes with ESPN and Showtime for Bellator, but they do strictly MMA. ONE FC could co-promote a boxing match with Ngannou. And I love that he was never going to go to ONE FC. Now that ONE FC deal is not on the table, please go back and watch the ONE FC owner Shatri Sityodtong interview with Ariel Helwani. He was loving the fact that ONE FC was looking to sign Francis Ngannou. He wouldn't shut up about it. Oh my God, dude, ONE FC is going to make a deal. This is huge news for Ngannou. And now you aren't too hot on the idea of him going to ONE FC. In fact, you would have crossed that off the list from the get-go. Not what you said to the owner of ONE FC when he was expressing interest in signing Ngannou. Not what you said to Ngannou when you were talking about the MMA promotions that would be asking for him. Whenever you've discussed this topic, you've brought up ONE FC, signing him for a crazy amount of money and paying him more, like they did with DJ and like they did with Alvarez. Why the change of tune now? Because you're coping. ONE FC could co-promote it. They have boxing on their events. They've hosted a WBC World Championship boxing match in their promotion. Under ONE FC banner, they've had a WBC World Championship boxing match. They could have made the move with Ngannou. They're making their way into the US. What better person to have? We're trying to break into the US market. They're coming over with DJ and Adriano Moraes. We also have Ngannou. Whenever we go to the US, Ngannou's our main event. That's how they break into the US. Now they never were interested anyway, and you don't see the point in him going over there? Come on, man.
For them and for combat sports, to me, the two best options for him were Bellator and PFL.
How convenient. The only two left in the game, but Bellator's being bought by PFL, it seems. How convenient. Those were the only two options, the only two that are left.
Yeah.
Have either of those said that they're out of the running?
And we're talking specifically MMA, right? We're not talking.
Yeah, I'm talking MMA.
Yep.
I'm talking about. But
Yeah, I'm talking MMA. That's the problem. I might make a whole new video about this. That's the fumbling of the bag that I was talking about at the start of this video. That's the fumble. I'm talking about MMA next. That's it. That's the L. If he didn't, the whole payoff to Ngannou being a free agent and away from the UFC was a $50 million boxing match with Joshua, Fury, or Wilder, fresh off of the fact that he was the heavyweight champion of the UFC before Jones even made his move against Cyril Gane. That was the whole sole success potential for Ngannou. And yeah, I'm talking about MMA. That's the L. We're now talking about MMA next at PFL against Ante fucking Deliha.
But honestly, even okay, who's Bellator aligned with? Showtime. Who's PFL aligned with? ESPN. Like, those were always the two best options. Those were always the two best options.
Especially if you
for MMA and not boxing.
Want to try and do both sections of that, right? If you want to get Francis as a boxer and if you want to get Francis as an MMA fighter, there's a potential path to that with those relationships.
The fact that he's going to have to go through a contract with PFL or Bellator, which I think is going to be PFL at this point, because Bellator's looking to sell. The fact that he's going to have to go to his potential boxing match through PFL is the L. They're taking a cut. They've got Ngannou. Oh, you want to do a boxing match? Sure, dude. Yeah, we'll take a cut from that, though. We're taking a cut from that. That's going to be a part of our contract. He shouldn't have signed with any MMA promotion. That was the win potential. Straight to boxing. One fight. Joshua, Wilder, or Fury. That's what he could have done. I think, you know what would have been better move than going to PFL or anywhere in MMA? Hey, Dillian Whyte, want to match up? 10 million. Bang. Dillian Whyte, straight to that matchup. Dillian Whyte. Derek Chisora in boxing. Fancy a matchup? Let's do that. Boom. Immediate cash. Straight away. No middleman. Ngannou with Ngannou Promotions, the fucking idiot, going over to boxing and fighting. Hey, Joe Parker. Any of those would have been a better deal than going through MMA first.
So yeah, I agree with you.
So anyway,
Of course you do. You need a fucking job. 15-14 in this video. This might be the last thing.
Again, I think that if you are in favor of fighters getting what they are owed, and,
sometimes they aren't owed what you think they are owed, but we'll go through it again.
You are in favor of fighters getting what they are owed and, maximizing their worth, short window, all that stuff. Why you would be rooting against a guy who is taking the road less traveled? I mean,
we're not rooting against him. You're hiding behind him. We're not rooting against Ngannou. We were just right, and it's happened already. Some people are rooting against Ngannou. They seriously are, because they were sick of him as UFC heavyweight champ anyway, and they wanted to see him stay in the UFC. So maybe that's what it is. But the majority of people just saw this shit coming and saw it being a disaster and know that it's because of you and other MMA media members filling Ngannou's head with dreams and hopes and fantasies because you hate Dana White and you hate the UFC and you used him. That's the facts. I did a video of this the second you interviewed him. Stop hiding behind, you don't want fighters to do well outside the UFC, I guess. Why is everyone rooting against? Why does everyone hate Ngannou? We hate the decision and we hate you for being a worm in this situation.
And truly the road less traveled. No one has ever been in his position. Heavyweight champ walks away from the... And yes, could he have made 5 million, 6 million, whatever it is from the UFC? And look at what look what that platform does to the Michael Chandlers of the world.
He knows it's more than 5 or 6 million, by the way. Could he have made 5 or 6 million? It was 7 or 8, and there were questions of whether or not it was 10. And Ngannou himself came out and said that he missed out on 7 million. So that's from the most trustworthy source that might be underselling what he was offered. Ngannou saying that it was 7 million that he was worth. That was the most trustworthy source that might be underselling it. But Ariel's like 5 or 6. You know what you're doing, man. You know what the numbers were.
And to the, name them of the world, right? Anyone who's under their umbrella. Yes, he's taking the road less traveled. For whatever reason, a guy who came from nothing. The rush to shit on him and to mock him and to say that he's fumbling the bag and to say that he's screwing up his career and to say is mind-boggling to me. Truly.
Then you're an idiot, and that's as simple as that. They're not rushing to shit on Ngannou, okay? That's not what people are rushing to do. People are really hyper aware of what's happening right now, and they're pointing out what's happening via the form of mocking Ngannou for his decision, mocking you, mocking people for putting dreams in his head. I think I checked the comment section before I made this video. Your whole comment section agrees with this. You putting fantasies in Ngannou's head. You being biased on this whole situation. And the way he twists this. Why is everyone trying to shit on Ngannou? Everyone's just being real with the decision that was made, and the internet does what they do best and make a joke out of it at someone's expense. I wish they were doing it at your expense, because that's who it really should be targeted at.
It's mind-boggling.
It's just also not objectively true, right? Like, we don't know. What bag did he fumble? It could be.
It could be a bag fumble, or it could be a success. Like, we just don't know yet.
We don't know. We don't know. I mean, I know we were talking about him fighting Fury Ngannou or Fury Joshua or Wilder for $50 million, and now he's going to be fighting Ante Delija at PFL in an MMA match, but we just don't know if it's a success or not yet. Right? Fucking idiots, dude. Fucking idiots. We're not rushing to call this an L or a fumble of the bag. It is because of the potential of what could have been. They're moving the goalposts. That's what they're doing. They're moving the goalposts. That's to sum up this whole video. That's what I'll end on. They're moving the goalposts. To them now, a win would be something good happening down the line. Or maybe he gets paid a lot at PFL. That's a win to them now because they're coping, because their original idea of a win was him fighting boxing world champions immediately for $50 million, which the logical realists among us knew would never fucking happen. They're moving the goalposts. So I bet you anything. He's going to sign to the PFL. He's going to get a fight, an MMA fight in the PFL against maybe a decent name. Who knows? They might pay Fedor to come back. Who knows? And these guys are going to call it a W, knowing that their idea as an original W was him fighting boxing world champions for $50 million. Like and subscribe. Toodle Pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.